Some stories just stick with you. They sit right at that fascinating, kind of terrifying crossroads where legend meets a really hard look at the facts. And honestly, there's no better example than the story of a haunted doll that absolutely terrified people. A story that really makes you question what you think you know. Yeah, that chilling line, that comes from Ed Warren, one of the most famous paranormal investigators, period. It just perfectly sets the stage for our story, reminding us that sometimes the most normal-looking things can be hiding something truly menacing. So let's get into it. And this isn't about that creepy porcelain doll you've seen in the movies. Nope. The real story starts with a simple, almost boring, Raggedy Ann doll that was given as a birthday gift to a student nurse named Donna. What's so wild is how fast things went from weird to terrifying. It all started back in 1970. The doll would just be in a different position. Kind of creepy, sure, but you could try to explain it away. But then came the notes, scribbled on parchment paper the nurses didn't even have, with messages like, "Help us." The real tipping point, though? Their friend Lou, who hated that doll from day one, was physically attacked. He was left with these strange claw marks that, get this, were completely gone in 2 days. Okay, this was definitely not a prank anymore. A story like that is it's horrifying. But it brings us to a really important question. How do you even begin to prove something like that? How do you investigate something that seems to just break all the rules of reality? Well, that's where the ghost hunters come in. So modern paranormal investigators, they don't just walk in and go by, a spooky feeling. They show up with a whole arsenal of tech, a whole toolkit of gadgets, all in the hopes of capturing some kind of solid proof. Okay, first up, you've almost definitely seen this one, the EMF meter. The whole theory here is that spirits either give off or mess with electromagnetic fields. So investigators use this thing to hunt for energy spikes that can't be explained by, bad wiring or a microwave. Next in the bag is the EVP recorder. The idea here is that ghosts can make sounds and even speak, but at frequencies our ears just can't pick up. So an investigator will go into a silent room, ask questions, and then play back the recording, listening for any whispered answers from the other side. And another huge one is the thermal camera. This thing doesn't see light, it sees heat. Ghost hunters use it to look for those sudden, bizarre drops in temperature. The classic cold spots, or maybe even capture the heat signature of something that isn't physically there. So here's the most important part to understand. This whole toolkit, this entire way of investigating, it's not just random. It's all built on a few very specific ideas about how ghosts are supposed to interact with our world. And here are those core beliefs, the very foundation of the hunt. 1. Ghosts create cold spots because they're sucking energy from the air. 2. They mess with EMF fields. 3. They talk in frequencies we can only get on a recording. 4. They show up on camera as little orbs of light. And 5. They can leave behind heat signatures. Literally every single gadget is designed to look for one of these things. Which leads us to the million-dollar question. It all looks so technical, right? So scientific. But are these foundational ideas actually based on solid science? Or is there something else going on entirely? All right, so this is where we kind of flip the script. We're going to go from the paranormal claim to the scientific explanation. And it turns out there are often some very logical, very natural reasons for the spooky stuff these gadgets pick up. Let's start with cold spots. The paranormal theory says it's a ghost trying to manifest. But the scientific explanation? Well, it's a lot less exciting. A cold spot can just be a simple draught from a window that doesn't seal right, or a damp patch on a wall, or even just really bad insulation. And what about those ghostly orbs you see in photos? Believers say they're spirits. But pretty much any photographer will tell you there's a much simpler answer. It's almost always just the camera's flash bouncing off tiny things in the air. Dust, pollen, moisture, even a little bug flying past at the exact right moment. Now, maybe the single most powerful scientific explanation for a lot of this stuff is a cool psychological thing called pareidolia. All it means is that our brains are hardwired to see patterns and familiar shapes in random stuff. It's literally why you see a face in the clouds or a man in the moon. I mean, our brains are just pattern-seeking machines. It's not a bug, it's a feature. But when you're in a dark, creepy basement and you're already expecting to see something spooky, well, that instinct goes into complete overdrive. Your brain is actively trying to find a ghost in the shadows. And this works with sound, too. That's called auditory pareidolia. So when that EVP recorder picks up a bunch of static or random background noise, a brain that's desperately listening for a voice will often turn that whoosh sound into a whisper that says, "Get out." So we have the ghost stories on one side and the scientific debunking on the other. But what that doesn't really account for is the power of a personal experience. You know, that moment when something happens to you that you just can't explain away. This quote is incredible. It's from the actual author of the research paper we've been referencing. He says that after his father passed away, both he and his brother clearly saw their mother, who had been dead for 30 years, just sitting on a bench. It was a shared, totally vivid experience that felt 100% real to them. And this puts him, and honestly, all of us, in a really tough spot. Was that a genuine spirit, his mom coming back to help his dad cross over? Or was it a powerful, shared trick of two grieving minds that were just desperate to see a comforting face? The thing is, even he doesn't know for sure. So this all leads to a surprisingly complex conclusion. On one hand, the research is pretty clear. The core ideas behind ghost hunting just aren't backed by science. But, and this is a huge but, these investigators often bring a huge amount of comfort and a sense of resolution to people who are genuinely in distress. So even if the methods aren't scientific, the positive psychological effect on the person can be very, very real. Which brings us right back where we started, with Annabelle. The Warrens decided the doll wasn't just haunted, it was tied to something demonic. They took it, had it blessed, and locked it away in a custom-built glass case in their museum. And it's still there today, with a big warning sign not to open it. It's really the ultimate symbol of belief winning out over skepticism. So in the end, we're left with this really compelling question. Are all these experiences truly supernatural? Or, as some people argue, are things like ghost stories and hauntings just pointing to the absolute limits of what we currently understand? Are they just a kind of science that we haven't figured out yet? Definitely something to think about.